first things first, Obsidian anniversary tips and thoughts. It's hard for me to sum up how I feel about my year with Obsidian thus far into words. And I struggle a lot with this when I try and explain what Obsidian is to people in my life who aren't really in the PKM space and aren't in the note-taking space. And the thing that's complicated about it is that it's a lot of things. Like it's something that you can present to clients with slideshows. It's a art tool with Excalidraw. It's a note-taking tool. It's a productivity manager with trackers and Kanbans and to-dos and to-dones and like markdown and calendars. And that doesn't even really get started about like what the community means too and how large the community is. But I'm really grateful for this software. I think looking back at my first note on September 4th, 2021, I was just really happy. I was really contented with the fact that I've been using this software for a year and had no expectation kind of going in. I wasn't necessarily looking for a replacement for Notion. I wasn't really looking for a replacement for journaling. I wasn't looking for a replacement for Google Drive, and I wasn't looking for a replacement for a lot of the apps that I would use on a day-to-day basis. Trello, Canva, etc. And all those apps are still really, really good at the things that they do. But Obsidian is just like, it's just such a unique experience. Like when you open up that graph view for the very first time after you have a few notes kind of like starting to like take form, it's just such a beautiful experience that's really kind of like hard to describe until you build your own graph and start to see how your own thoughts really build into their own kind of characteristics and have their own little quirks and stuff. It kind of in a way feels like what I imagine. I don't have any children, but I kind of think it feels like what parenting must feel like in some ways, where you're watching this thing grow organically and you have a very heavy hand in watching it grow, but you don't really get to control the final outcome. It's just something that happens to you, or maybe through you, maybe with you, but not because of you. Obsidian is very similar. I feel like out of all of the technologies that I've used over the past couple years, Obsidian has felt the most organic. It's felt the most characteristically unique in both scope of what it provides, but also the most readily accessible to its own evolution, if that makes sense. Like with Notion, for example, my biggest bottlenecks on Notion were that it didn't move fast enough. Notion is very, very opinionated. It's set up in a way that, PKM is like, oh, you do this, and then you put things in tables that look like this and this and this. And that might have just moved too slow for the emergent nature of how thoughts just occur. Paper, on the other hand, suffered a different problem where paper felt really limited by it felt unlimited in certain ways. Paper feels unlimited in the ways that you can write pretty much anything on paper, and anything that you can fit with a pen on paper can happen. But paper's big downside is that it's paper. And if you want to digitize this information, it's always a struggle. And even as OCR has gotten better, it's not great. So if you want to search something, there's no real good way to search. But even more than that, there's no good way to index and do other things that computation would do that you would have to do manually. And sometimes that manual task is nice because it forces you to really habitualize certain things and come to terms with certain things that computers can kind of just be like, oh, we'll just put it, you don't worry about your file size. Don't worry about how many pages you've written. It'll all fit in memory. It's fine. But Obsidian kind of combines the best of the both of them, right? It feels like paper. I don't feel limited by Obsidian in any real way like I did with other PKM tools and notes, not only just because of the extensibility of the API, but through the giant plugin network and community that people have built. It really has been a group effort to make Obsidian what it is today. And, there's so many nice people who I've met in the Obsidian community who have changed my mind so deeply about what it means to take notes and what it means to write good software and what it means to participate in the open source space. And I think all of these things really are kind of hard again to quantify. It's kind of hard to say like, this is what Obsidian has meant to me over the past year. But in a lot of ways, it's served as so much of a growth mechanism for how I consider the world. And it's shown me how to connect ideas that I thought were distinct and disparate. And it's shown me how to also be as creatively free as I might be on paper. So as I head into year 2 I do have a number of concerns I'm worried about. I have over 6,000 notes in my main vault. As a matter of fact, I can take a picture of my main vault's graph real quick. So I have over 6,000 notes in my main graph, and these 6,000 notes are all independent nodes in this giant network. And I think as I kind of go forward through this next year, I am kind of worried that like it will become too big for me to manage. It's already kind of greater than I had anticipated going in, and it kind of not scares me, but it's slightly overwhelming at times, right? Like I'll look at it and I'll just kind of be like shocked as to how big this graph has gotten. And like, I've gotten so good that I can kind of like pick things out without, I can see what different sections are without having to actually go look at the actual note thing. Like I know that this over here is, tweets that I've saved from Twitter. And then this over here is books in the top corner. And then the bottom right is like articles, and coding is mixed in the middle a lot. My favorite Twitch streamers are in there. Like all of my daily notes are in there. The disambiguations of books notes are on the far right corner. And like all of these things are just like, things that I took down in the moment that ended up living a life much bigger than just the note that I took down in that moment, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like to watch as a rose. I don't know. There's a very real possibility that Obsidian in this past year has helped shape my sense of self and has made me a smarter person in the same way that reading makes you a smarter person or a more well-rounded person, or travel makes you a smarter and more well-rounded person. I think being able to see my ideas in real 3D-ish space and map them out and regraph them and reshape them based on my moods and opinions and things that I've learned about myself and topics have really helped me connect a lot of dots that were in my own head very far apart from each other. So I'm really excited for year 2. I think that this year is going to be better than ever, and it's going to be just really cool to see how both my own personal vault and the community continue to shape up. I'm really excited that I've got some really cool stuff coming soon with some other people in the community who are going to get involved with this stream, and it's just going to be a really great time. I think that there's a lot of really cool stuff that is yet to be explored in the Obsidian space. We are still very much at the nascent stage, and for anyone who's looking to get into the PKM kind of graphing knowledge space, and this is even before AI gets involved in it and networked nodes and stuff like that, I would say now is the time. Now is the time to really leverage the intense amount of free data on the internet to chronicle stuff that you already have and chronicle these thoughts that you've had for your entire life just by existing, or capture the best parts of your career, capture the greatest parts of your day, talk about what makes you sad, talk about what makes you happy, and record it, and then link it back into other parts of your life and try and see the commonalities and the similarities between where your ideas lie in space, and then use a shit ton of plugins to really bring it together in different visual patterns and different formations, and utilize the different texts and tags and stuff to move ideas around and reshape them and reorganize them, break things apart and put them back together again. Obsidian is amazing at all of these things, and the unlock that I've gotten from that this past year has been tangible. It's been graspable, and then there's a reason that I've spent so much time adding it to my mobile devices and making sure that it syncs between computers and doing all this extra work to make sure that I have it all backed up and stored and duplicated and encrypted, and doing all these things to make sure that my vault can continue to grow unabated. And when you can really unlock that movement within your own Obsidian vault, you start to see the magic too that the rest of us have seen. That sounds cultish. I don't know. You get what I mean though, where you get to see it feels like, I think that if I've had any good descriptor for Obsidian in the past, however long that I've been using this a year, my best descriptor that I've had for Obsidian that I think I've said is that Obsidian is to me like the old cameras were in the 1830s, where everybody would take these super grainy photos and the daguerreotype cameras, and you could make out just what was happening, but you couldn't really make out any of the details or the shading or the lighting or the important kind of aspects that make up a picture. But Obsidian feels like that for my thoughts. So I will take down an extremely filtered, conscious version of something and I'll record it into my Obsidian, and then I will forget about that note and then then later that month, or months later, I'll come back and I'll hit the random note button and I'll see that note again, and I'm like, oh, you know what, that's actually related to this note. Or I'll prune it, or I'll recategorize it as something. I'll just do like the gardening step basically of Obsidian, and then you come to harvest, right? So then you come back a few months later and you're looking for a certain idea, and you go and find it, and it exists somewhere within this graph in some shape or form, if you've been doing a good job of recording the things that go into this graph. And the more that I've done this, the more that I've kind of accepted this kind of truth of just saying like, oh, this is a really rough-grained image of what's going on in my mind that I'm taking the conscious effort to record, and even trying to do some of the unconscious stuff too, right? You can sync automatic data that comes from heart rate monitors and stuff like that too, and you can kind of start to see pictures in different detail to what you would have normally been able to see them in. So for those who are just getting into the Obsidian space, you're still very much on the beginning of something great. So I would recommend getting involved and having a lot of fun.